Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Engage to Excel group conversation series, being on the receiving end of recognition. I am Tamika Figaro, the moderator for today, and I'm also joined by our guest speaker, Roy Saunderson.
Hi there.
Hello. In today's conversation, we'll discuss how to be more receptive to recognition, and we'll have Roy answer all your questions while we're having the conversation. So, as we're having the conversation, we encourage everyone to ask their questions that Roy will answer. So, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to type your question, and I will ask them to Roy. If we don't have time to get to your question, note that we will reach back to you by email. You can contact us at info@engage2excel.com. I'm going to put the email address in the chat box so you can have it right here. Perfect. So this conversation is being recorded and it will be available on the Engage to Excel Vimeo page within 3 business days. We'll make sure to send you a link via email when it's ready to watch so you don't have to look for it. And yeah, so for today's conversation, I am joined by Roy Saunderson, the Chief Learning Officer of Engage to Excel Group. For those who do not know him, Roy has been in the employee recognition field for 24 years now, and he's also the author of Practicing Recognition, How to Give Meaningful Recognition to People Every Day. Roy, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's good to be back again.
Yes, absolutely. Today is a very interesting subject because we talk a lot about giving recognition, but we don't talk about the other side of recognition, which is receiving recognition, and it's as important as giving it. So can you tell us more about why some people have a hard time receiving recognition when it's given to them?
Yes, Tamika, I think this is a great topic because we always talk about how to give better recognition, more meaningful, more motivational, more memorable. But we forget this part about, what happens on the receiving side. My friend Chris Littlefield, who's the founder of Beyond Thank You, he conducted some research a little while ago and found that 88% of the people that he surveyed feel that recognition is about feeling valued, and that's a good thing. But at the same time, he found that 70% of the people that they surveyed felt embarrassed or uncomfortable with being recognized. So I think it's important to look at some of the reasons why so many might be uncomfortable with receiving recognition. If we've grown up in any type of I use the word authoritarian in a broad sense, upbringing in our lives, at school, or at work, it can often be a kind of a command and control kind of setting. You receive directions, instructions, and you diligently obey and perform, the task, the work, whatever it is. But in that environment, you just don't expect to receive praise, recognition, or appreciation in those kind of environments. There might also be cultural or family factors. I grew up in a British home environment. And if you've ever watched these are all stereotypic stuff, right? And the British home environment, I never heard "I love you" growing up. And in the like manner, I never received any recognition. And it was only in later in life when I talked to my dad's brothers, my uncles, that I found out that none of them heard the same words at their home. So it was very much a perpetuating of the learned behaviors in family life. They never heard expressions of love or recognition. So we can also have a hard time, I think, receiving this recognition simply because we're not used to receiving it. It doesn't happen that frequently. In fact, according to the Gallup organization, they figure only up to 2/3 of the people never receive recognition or praise for doing good work in any given week. That's a scary lot of people. That's a lot of people not recognized. So no wonder it's such a surprise when you do receive recognition. We don't know what to do. It's kind of like, kind of deer in the headlight kind of phenomena when we do get recognized. And that's why, we might respond verbally with comments like, "Oh, it was nothing," or "think nothing of it. I was just doing my job. It's no big deal." Or we deflect it saying it was a team effort, trying to kind of get rid of ourselves in the equation here. So I think these are some of the reasons why we might have a hard time with receiving recognition in our lives.
You know what? I think you said it very well. It's cultural. Some people are very open to recognition. Other people, they didn't grow up with it. So it's different for them. And I know that you have captured some typical responses from people in the work environment. So I'm very curious to know which kind of responses did you get, whether they're positive or negative, and what can we learn from them?
Well, I think you've highlighted a very important part about recognition, whether it's giving or receiving. It's great to observe what's going on around you. Watch how you react. It's catching yourself when you get recognized, and watch how other people react when they receive recognition. Make a note of that. It's the best way to learn. And it's how I've gained my insights and learning around this. So, what do you see happening, or what do you hear when people respond? People might, look down or away, or kind of any kind of, they might be embarrassed, as we've kind of heard. And you might end up using kind of weak responses to reply to people who recognize you, saying, "Oh, that's all right," or "Don't mention it," or "Oh, not at all," or "It was nothing." We say all these things, and if we take a closer look at the expressions people give, I think afterwards we can kind of hear what people are saying back to other people, and there's a negative deflection, and that deflates the giver of recognition. So let's look at this. So let's take that's all right. When people say, "Oh, that's all right," it's not the worst response in the world, but it's still minimizing the comment, the recognition expression that's been given. You might have gotten a shipment out early, and we say, "Well, that's all right." Well, yeah, but it's not really a good positive response. And then we hear them, "Oh, don't mention it," right? I don't know about you, but I love the Harry Potter books, and it always reminds me of the main antagonist as he who should not be named, for Voldemort. And I think when we say "don't mention it," the inference here is telling the person who's thanking us to not mention it. Like, don't say anything about it. So it creates a bit of confusion for the poor giver of recognition. We might hear "not at all," which is, again, a very vague statement. It's easy to get caught up in some of these kind of generally accepted phrases. And it's not the worst one. It's hard to interpret a little bit, but anything that starts with the word "not" still has a leaning towards negative feedback. And then the classic one, which I think I've heard far too many times: "Oh, it was nothing," right? So I want you to imagine, you've just praised me, Tamika, and I say, "Oh, it was nothing." You're kind of going, "Well, wait a minute, I thought it was something." And I'm saying it's really nothing. It wouldn't merit being acknowledged. So I think all these kind of expressions really kind of cause the giver of recognition to question themselves about the recognition they're giving, and it negates it. So if it was really nothing and we're trying to acknowledge positive things about people, it's kind of an ouch for the giver of recognition. They're kind of going, "What am I doing?" And it stops them perhaps from giving recognition in the future, which is not a good thing.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a very interesting point of view because I am the kind of person who will say, "Don't mention it," as a
Okay.
polite answer. But it's nice to see it the other way around because
Yes.
now I'm seeing that, okay, maybe I respond in a negative way and how it affects the other person. So I'm curious to know what is your perspective on uh, how it affects the other person when we respond negatively to them and how it affects them in the recognition they've given to us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important to look at that because you'll see their countenance change. I mean, there they were coming. Hey, giving recognition can be scary as well. Giving recognition can be scary. So there's a lot of courage that goes in to giving recognition. If someone is more comfortable and it's easier to do, they can still be kind of like puzzled, but wow, that didn't go over well. Was it me or was it the other individual? My wife and I have a weekly date. We always have a date once a week, and we play games, we watch movies, we go out when you can go out, and we just rewatched. I mean, I haven't watched it in 5 years. I watched it with the grandkids the last time, and that was the classic Moana. Animated movie from Disney, and of course you've got Dwayne, the Rock Johnson, who sings and voices over for the legendary demigod Maui, I guess. And there's one song in the movie where he sings a song called "You're Welcome." I'll sing it in that little tune. It's classic. And he's telling an ungrateful Moana, well, anyway, let me say, "You're welcome." And whenever you receive thanks for something or you're recognized for a positive contribution you've made, you can say some of these far more positive responses. And then I'll say to you, look at the different reaction from the giver of recognition. So you can say, "You're welcome, my pleasure, thank you, I appreciate you saying that." And what are we really saying when we use these positive feedback phrases? So let's do the "you're welcome." You're telling the person who's thanking you or recognizing you that you're welcome to to them for acknowledging your services, your talents, your abilities, and that you're glad to have helped them, glad to have made a difference. Wow, we've got two-way positivity going on here. That's how it affects the giver. The term "my pleasure," I don't know about you, Tamika, but I've heard this a lot, very frequently from customer service people, hospitality professionals. You making a reservation for a hotel, whatever. You're communicating to the giver of recognition and thanks that you enjoyed doing what you did, and it was no major trouble for you to do the task at hand. Thank you. I mean, this is the classic, right? This is what we want to hear more often than not. It can be given, and it's always a positive acknowledgement. And I think if you're tempted, because some people will say thank you and then they'll still do a negative. And I'm going to say, if you've got that tendency to deflate even with saying thank you, you're doing a double positive and a negative, and it kind of negates the positive. So I'm going to say to you, say thank you and just zip the lips. Don't say anything else. If you're getting stuck with this, just learn to say thank you and be comfortable. I think I appreciate you saying that is a good line that you can use. And if you're like most people, you really do appreciate being recognized and acknowledged. It's just the embarrassment and not knowing how to respond that causes us the discomfort. So why not tell them how much you appreciate the individual saying what they did? And, I think it's important that we gain confidence in using these positive expressions. And as we get used to saying thank you, for example, we can do some additional things. We can add the person's name afterwards. I can say, "Thank you, Tamika." I can just make it a little bit more personal. We can add maybe an experiential statement to the acknowledgement, where you could state how it felt to accomplish or achieve the task, and let the people know that, yeah, it was really exciting to be able to do that. I'm glad I was able to help that customer. It felt good. And then don't hesitate to acknowledge others. I mean, maybe the person who's recognizing you thinks that you're the only person who made the difference. So thank them for that. And I also want you to know that Tamika, Melissa, John, helped me with this to get this accomplished. They need to know that so that maybe they can acknowledge other people, or you might give a secondhand compliment to those other individuals. Say, "Hey, I want you to know Roy thanked me for this, and I made mention of all the work that you did with this. So it is a wonderful way of spreading this recognition just by how you're acknowledging the recognition you receive. And of course, we want to use positive nonverbals to acknowledge the individual who's recognizing. So smile, for goodness sakes. You know what I mean? Like, and where it's culturally appropriate, look the person in the eye after and during the time that they're recognizing you. So I think I'd want to say to everyone in our conversation today, not to negatively reinforce with poor word choices the recognition that people are attempting to give to you. I mean, it may be awkward for them as well. Um, and I think it's important to be willing to teach by your example how to receive recognition, that's going to spread as well and help recognition become more integrated into the organization.
Yes, that's a very good point. And we actually have comments from the audience. Um, First comment is, I remember having to teach people to be accepting of recognition, just saying thank you instead of nothing. So, like you said, sometimes you just have to say thank you and that's it, which is a very
Mm-hmm.
good point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have a question from the audience, and it's, how do you give recognition to someone who has a hard time accepting recognition, especially public recognition?
Well, I think two things there. There's two parts to this. Somebody who has difficulty receiving, and we also have the comment about public. I think we really do need to acknowledge that in some cases it can be up to 25% or more of the workplace that is uncomfortable with public recognition. The less people related jobs that people are in, that percentage is going to be even far higher. So we do need to find out the recognition preferences of our peers, of employees, and honor them for it. I know one colleague at our company who, we had a CEO who was very outgoing and loved to have the big grand events for the public recognition, and it was a hard thing for him to understand that there were people who didn't like that. And once we turned that around and started looking at the preferences, I remember this one individual said, no, I don't like going up on the stage. I'm embarrassed. I'm scared I might trip on the way. I don't know what I'm going to say afterwards, if I'm going to say anything and embarrass myself. So they just wanted to be with their boss in the office with two or three colleagues that they worked directly with. And that was so meaningful for them. I think the other part, going part to the original piece about people who are uncomfortable, why not acknowledge it? Why not say, I know, Tamika, that you might feel a little uncomfortable with being recognized, but I want you to know how much it meant to me that you completed this action in such quick time. It helped me to be able to get this presented to the board, for example, and it was a great help. Thank you so much, Tamika, for helping me out with that. I think acknowledge the discomfort a person might feel. And again, if you've now removed the public recognition piece away and it's a one-on-one or it's with two or three people at most, I think you've kind of broken a lot of barriers down to receiving that recognition. So I think that's important to acknowledge the personality and the preferences that people have and deal with those points.
Yes, good point. And for me, in my personal experience, I know that sending recognition to someone who is a bit more introverted, sending them recognition that is written rather than spoken in public, just gives them time to accept the recognition and come back to me when they're ready. So that's
Good
something that
point.
I've learned.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So, is there anything we can do to stop a negative response from people? For example, like we mentioned, who are introverted, who have a hard time accepting recognition.
Yeah, my wife Irene can tell you one example I did. Maybe it's like any occupational hazard you have, depending on what your expertise is in. So my expertise is recognition, and poor Irene, she would sometimes, kind of deflect any thank you that I might give, and I would say stop, and I put my hand out. I stop. Just say thank you. And you know what? It's been a fun and especially when you are warm, personal, outgoing, to actually say, now stop, just say thank you, and teach them the importance of accepting recognition the right way. And I even say, okay, so what should you say when I recognize you? And they go, okay, thank you. I mean, it's light, but I think it's important to stop negative behaviors no matter what they are. I think it's also good to maybe just take a deep breath and mentally accept it. I mean, this might be unusual, it might be a little uncomfortable, but learn to receive positively. And I think if we just pause a little, and I'm slowing my voice down right now to convey this point, we can then maybe deal with the battle that's in our mind with the self-talk that might negate the positive things that are being told to us. So breathe, pause, learn to accept. This is new, but I think it can be a worthwhile experience. I think always learning to thank the person recognizing it. As I've shared before, it takes a lot of courage for some people to give recognition. So no matter what you think of what the person said, I think just learning to say thank you. And as I've said earlier, zip the lips if you have to. It may be this awkward rebellion inside, but just say thank you and appreciate it, and get used to saying thank you. I have found as people get more comfortable with saying thank you, that they're going, hey, this isn't so bad. This is I can accept this. So I want people to reflect on the behaviors being recognized. So take a moment, when you hear the things that are being said about what you've done, think about it. Accept the value that they've placed in your work, in your actions, and who you are. And then, another thing people can do is acknowledge what the other person sees. Say something that agrees with and supports their expression of recognition and praise of you, uh, so that they can feel acknowledged for what they've seen. Tell them that you're grateful for their words that are causing even you to see things better than you might have done before they acknowledged you. And of course, to smile when people recognize you, and tell them what you appreciate about their recognition. You might have seen some things that you hadn't thought of before. Tell the other person, who's expressing the recognition to you, what their words have caused you to think differently about yourself or about the work that you do as you say thank you. And I think those are some things that we can do to acknowledge people and deal with those negativity.
Yes, and also to add to what you said, we have a comment in the chat saying
Uh-huh.
that by giving specific details about the recognition, you can make those people understand how much your comments mean. Also, a connection to the benefits to the company.
Absolutely. And we know on previous conversations we've had where I've talked about my two-part specificity rule in being specific about the behavior or action the person did, the action, and then being specific about the impact their action made. Because too many people get caught up with just saying good job and well done, which doesn't mean much, really, they can't give much back. So when you do give specific recognition, as this individual has said, you can't help but feel pretty good and probably a little bit easier to say thank you to.
Yeah. We also have another question from the audience. I'm going to get to it. So the question is, I never know how to respond to recognition on a call with multiple people. Most of us are on mute and our cameras are off. And sometimes the person who recognizes me doesn't see my response in the chat section. Do you have any advice?
Oh, wow, this wonderful virtual problem that we're having now, right? With
Yes.
all Zoom calls and whatever WebEx go-tos and whatever Teams, all the mediums that we use now. It's challenging when we have that group meeting, isn't it? When everybody's on. But I think you might have mentioned a little bit here where you could make a comment in the chat feature. You could certainly raise a hand. You can, I think, come off of camera and mute, and at the right time be able to comment on that. And I know we were talking with Melissa just beforehand. I like the idea of you know continuing the feedback by sending an email afterwards to the individual. Often these group meetings are going through an agenda item of acknowledging people, and that's expected. But you're right; sometimes they kind of fill in the gaps where you can't you can't say anything, or the meeting is continuing on. So it does get a little awkward, especially if you're uncomfortable with receiving recognition and trying to insert a comment at the right time and right place. It's not always a convenient medium. But I think maybe this also reminds us as givers of recognition in those calls to maybe pause a little more, to maybe give some breathing room and allow people to make those comments. So I think that also is a management of how we're using virtual meetings. And we can maybe do that a little better on the giving side and allow people to come in when they're receiving the recognition, either during or after, in whatever way they can.
Yes, that's very good information you give us to be more confident in accepting recognition. And as a final question, what I have for you is, do you have any advice for us to respond when we're being recognized? I know we went over it a little bit, but any last thoughts?
Yes, I think it's important that we take this very seriously. I don't think we talk about receiving recognition enough. And so I think this needs to be built into the practices that we want to instill in our organizations to help people realize that how you receive recognition can either encourage or deflect people from giving recognition. I shared some comments from my friend Chris Littlefield earlier, and he suggests treating every recognition or compliment that you receive as a gift. So Tamika, I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot. Let's pretend I'm giving you a gift. It's your birthday, it's Christmas, and I want you to think about, I'm giving you a gift. It's a tangible gift. It's wrapped up. What are you going to say to me?
Thank you.
Right. Notice how that is such a more common response to receiving a tangible gift. It's more immediate. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say no thank you, or I wish you hadn't, or less often than I have to a comment of recognition or praise. So I'm glad you said what you said, Tamika. And Chris's recommendation is to do exactly the same after someone has recognized you. Because in reality, an act of recognition is a gift. So let's treat any praise, recognition, acknowledgement as a gift. And if we treat it that way, I think we're going to say thank you far more often. I think that's my final thought to leave with people.
That's some very good advice. I'm going to take this advice next time I receive recognition. I'm going to take it as a gift. So that was my final questions for today. I don't think we have any more questions, but if anyone has questions, of course, you can contact us at info@engagetoexcel.com. That is it for me. Roy, thank you for the incredible advice you've given to us. I'm going to close this out. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And thank you, Roy, again.
And my pleasure, or you're welcome.
That's great. I'm going to remember that. See you.
Take care. Bye, Tamika.
Bye.